Hey everybody, the next video we need to cover, the next topics we need to cover are a variety of summer pests. What we're going to talk about today are surface feeding insects, which become an issue starting right about now and can be issues. Any one of these surface feeding insects can be a problem anytime between now and pretty much throughout the month of September. Generally, we don't have major problems with any of these. They're worse in some years than they are in others. And the one that is generally of the most concern to us are chinch bugs. So let's review the situation with chinch bugs to begin with. Chinch bugs, as are all of the insects we're going to discuss today, are what's referred to as surface feeders. Surface feeders, as the name implies, simply means they cause their damage by feeding on the upper parts or the grass leaves. Surface feeders, the opposite of surface feeder would be a subsurface feeder, and you're all familiar with grubs, which are under the category of subsurface feeders, because they eat and they destroy the grass by eating and destroying the roots. Chinch bugs in particular are a problem throughout the summer, and especially under droughty conditions. We've really not had much in the way of droughty conditions this year, but we will certainly be getting into them at some point in time over the next 2 to 3 months. Chinch bugs generally can be easy to misdiagnose because their damage their damage mimics drought conditions. You might look at a lawn and think it is simply dry, either from lack of rainfall or lack of irrigation, when in fact the damage is being caused by chinch bugs feeding on the grass leaves. Chinch bugs generally are a problem in fescue lawns, but on rare occasions they can be problems in Kentucky bluegrass lawns. And one way to become suspicious of whether or not you've got a chinch bug problem is the turf will tend to not recover, or the turf fails to recover from drought. Bottom line is, when we see lawns that are in drought or in serious drought, it's always important for us to look closely for chinch bugs, because we don't want to assume a lawn is in drought stress when in fact chinch bugs are causing the damage. Here's just an example of the front lawn here at Seascape from a couple of years ago. What appears as drought damage was in fact damage from chinch bugs. And the damage can be, as I said, easily diagnosed. However, you've got to be looking for the problem, and you can't assume that turf that looks like drought and nothing but drought, such as here, or in this particular case, in these dry spots in the lawn, we can't assume automatically that these spots are going to recover with either rainfall or irrigation. Chinch bugs, adult chinch bugs, which are causing the problem, are appearing here. These are typical adult chinch bugs, and they're generally described as having a couple of antennae, as well as wings that fold back across their back. You can see the white wings on the actual chinch bug, as well as the line drawing. Chinch bugs actually don't do a lot of flying, even though they have these wings. They will hop around a little bit, but they don't actually fly much from one location to the next. Chinch bugs, after they hatch from eggs, getting ahead of ourselves here. Chinch bugs, after they hatch from eggs, go through a number of life stages, from nymphs all the way up to the wing adult, which I was showing you just a moment ago. The picture on the right-hand side shows both the adults with the wings folded across their back, as well as some of the early stage nymphs. And you can see here the early stage nymphs While they're smaller than the adults, they are characteristically red. And when you see a combination of the winged adults along with the red nymphs, you can be pretty certain that you've got chinch bugs that are causing these droughty looking conditions in the turf. Chinch bugs are impossible to diagnose driving by a lawn or standing adjacent or on a lawn. They are very difficult. They're impossible, in fact, to diagnose unless you actually get down and take a look. You've got to physically get down on your hands and knees. You've got to separate the grass is what I am showing here. And when you do separate the grass and look down into the thatch, if there's a chinch bug problem, you will see hundreds, if not thousands, of these chinch bugs scurrying around. And again, look for the winged adults, but also look for the red nymphs. The red nymphs are a dead giveaway that the problem is with chinch bugs. Just an example of what chinch bugs will look like after you separate the turf. They'll real quickly hop onto your hands. Right here in the center of the palm is an adult chinch bug. And if you look closely, you can see a few of the red nymphs here as well. If you're going to be looking for chinch bugs by separating the turf, here is what I'm showing. What you want to look is you want to look at the perimeter of the damaged area. In other words, look at that interface between where the turf appears to be damaged or brown, where it interfaces with the green grass. That generally in that interface or that border between the dead grass and the live grass, that generally is where you will see chinch bugs that are congregating and doing their damage. When do we want to check for chinch bugs? Okay, when and where do we want to check for chinch bugs? Basically, we want to take a close look at any lawn that is in drought stress. Don't assume because it hasn't rained in a while. That's the reason for the lawn looking brown, because chinch bugs can easily be causing damage. You want to check in droughty lawns. You want to check in areas not recovering, okay, not recovering from rain or irrigation. What do I mean by that? For example, if we've had a week or we've had 10 days of rain and there are areas of a lawn or the entire lawn that is not beginning to recover, that's probably a telltale sign that you want to be looking for chinch bugs. Chinch bugs generally tend to cause their problem on hillsides, in sunny areas, as well as on fescue lawns. So be particularly careful of chinch bug damage in those particular situations. Should note that they will not damage, chinch bugs will not damage grass in shaded areas, much like certain weeds such as crabgrass that will not be a problem in shaded areas. Okay, chinch bugs are not going to be a problem in shaded areas, and generally you're not going to find them there. Bottom line is, though, if a lawn is in drought stress, take 30 seconds, check a couple of areas for chinch bugs before making the assumption that there are not chinch bugs in the lawn at the time. Couple of other considerations with chinch bugs. The material that we use to control chinch bugs is the exact same material that we use on our flea and tick program. Sometimes it's referred to as Tallstar, sometimes Benfin. But when we do apply our flea and tick program, we are applying Tallstar. And Tallstar is the product that we would also be using to control adult chinch bugs. So in general, if you're on a lawn and you notice the flea and tick program is also being applied to that lawn, generally you're not going to have a problem with chinch bugs. The other thing we should note is that the material that we're using this year, Electus, okay, Electus does contain a pyrethroid insecticide. And generally, if we're applying Electus in the form of grub control, we generally are not going to have a problem with chinch bugs on that lawn. If you do check for lawn damage, but you are not finding chinch bugs, okay, you might want to consider, if the lawn appears dry despite rain, you might want to consider treatment with Tall Star as a precaution. We've seen many lawns that you check it on Monday and there don't appear to be any chinch bugs, but then it gets rechecked again 3 to 4 days later, and chinch bugs are present, and we might want to consider putting down an application of Tall Star if you suspect there's chinch bugs, but at that moment that you're checking it, you are not finding any. If you do find chinch bugs and you treat with Tall Star, okay, it's important that we write up a "we will be back" form. We need to make certain that we got good control of the chinch bugs, and we need to make certain that the lawn is beginning to recover. If you do find on a "we will be back" situation or a service call situation, if you do find there is permanent damage from chinch bugs, note that we own that, so to speak. We're going to have to repair that damage. You need to inform your manager. You need to inform the office of the situation and make sure that the lawn gets taken care of. Certainly in that particular case where we are having permanent damage from chinch bugs, that is going to require some seeding in order for it to be required. You certainly, in order for it to be repaired, you certainly have to leave a note for the customer in regards to what is going on with that particular situation. That's pretty much it with chinch bugs. Moving on to the second surface insect that could be a problem over the course of the next 2 to 3 months. Bill bugs is another surface feeding insect that can be causing damage. The picture here on the right shows both a bluegrass bill bug adult. That is the black insect with the snout on the front. The bill bug uses that snout in order to bore into the grass plant stem. He lays an egg inside the plant. That egg then will hatch and develops into a small grub. This bill bug grub is not the size of the grubs that we generally will find in soil. It is much smaller in size. And when that grub hatches, it will actually destroy the turf by feeding as it moves down throughout the stem of the grass plant, using the grass plant for nutrition in order for that grub to survive. Both the adult chinch bug as well as the grub are extremely difficult to find. Unlike the chinch bugs, where you'll find thousands of chinch bugs in a lawn, a very small number of bluegrass bill bug adults can do serious damage to a lawn. An average sized lawn could have as few as 8 to 10 adult bill bugs in them. And those 8 to 10 bill bugs are going to lay enough eggs in the stems of the grass plant that they can do widespread damage on a lawn. If you ever do find a bluegrass bill bug, it's a rarity to find one. And you might want to actually collect the sample to bring it back to the office to show some of your fellow technicians what exactly they look like. Bluegrass bill bug grubs cause damage by destroying the base of the grass plant. The grub actually, as it feeds on down through the grass plant and through the crown of the plant, so to speak. The crown of the plant is where the stems of the grass plant meet the roots of the grass plant. That is the growing point where new roots and new stems are initiated, and the bluegrass bill bug adult will destroy that area of the grass plant. Here's a cross-section of the crown of a grass plant, which actually has a bluegrass bill bug grub in it. That grub is eating its way down, and that is how they will destroy the individual grass plants. Unlike chinch bugs, which generally are a problem mostly in fine fescue lawns, as the name implies, the bluegrass billbug grub is much more of a problem in bluegrass as compared to chinch bugs. I'm unaware that the billbug will cause damage in ryegrass or in fescue. It typically does most damage in bluegrass lawns. Remember that most of our sodded lawns are primarily bluegrass. And so this is one thing or one insect you want to be suspicious of if you see damage in bluegrass lawns. Diagnosing billbugs is difficult because you're not going to see the adults. It's a rarity to see the grubs after they're done feeding because they're very small. One thing that you might want to look for is that if you pull on the turf in the damaged areas, and again, you want to pull on the turf in the area where the damaged grass is butted up against the grass that still looks healthy. If you pull it up and turn it upside down, you're going to find, number one, the grass plants break off very easily at the bottom of the stem. And you can actually look inside the stem once you're holding the stems upside down, and you can see where the stems are hollow from the billbugs that have eaten their way down through the stem. You may also see some sawdust-like material that's called frass in and around where you have pulled the turf up. It looks very much like sawdust, and again, it is the result of the billbug grub eating its way down through the grass plant. Finally, the last of the surface feeding insects that you will occasionally run into in our neck of the woods is what's referred to as a sod webworm. The picture that you're looking at here is the adult moth. This moth does not do damage to the grass. It's the larvae form or the worm form of this adult that you're looking at here. This webworm adult, you're going to see mostly at dusk, so you're generally not going to see these adults when you're spreading lawns throughout the day. But if you do see them, they tend to fly in a very jerky zigzag pattern as they fly around. As you're walking across the lawns or driving your Z-Spray across the lawns, you're going to see a variety of different brown moths that you might be kicking up or disturbing, and they fly as you're beginning to approach. If you're seeing them during midday, you can pretty much assume that those moths that you're looking at are not adult sod webworm moths. Again, they fly around mostly at dusk. So if you are seeing moths flying around in the middle of the day, especially in the heat of the day, don't automatically assume those moths are sod webworm adults. Remember now, this adult moth does not do any damage to the turf. It's the larvae that will develop from the eggs that this moth will lay in the turf. The sod webworm larvae, okay, which is pictured here, or the worm, if you will, of the webworm, okay, generally will have a brown or a green body. And as you can see here, it's got dark spots in rows across the back of the webworm. These webworms are typically 1 inch to 1.5 inches long. You generally will not see these webworms during the day because during the day in the heat, they tend to burrow down below the thatch, and they will come out at nighttime. They'll feed at night when it's cooler. So once, just like the adult moths, you're probably not going to see these worms feeding during the day. But when they do come out at night, they are going to chew the leaves and the stems off, and they will cause patches as large as a basketball in the turf, where the turf has been eaten right down to the thatch. One more time during, as I said, during the daytime, these worms will move down into the thatch to get away from the heat of the day. You can sometimes see, and this is a picture of a webworm, and you can see this green material, which is basically the fecal matter of the webworm. Okay, you may from time to time see these green fecal pellets in the turf if you look in the areas that have been damaged. The other note that I have here is that one way you can find these larvae during the day, and you can get them to move up to the surface, is by applying to the surface a weak soap solution. For example, putting a little bit of dishwasher soap, dish soap such as Dawn or something such as that, into a watering can, and then watering the area will sometimes prompt these webworms. It irritates them somehow, and it will bring them up to the surface. We're not going to be issuing everybody dishwashing liquid here in order to do it, in order to try diagnose adults. But you might want to be looking for this frass, which you generally should be able to find even during the day. One more time on webworms, they're going to cause basketball-sized patches as it eats the leaves and the stems right down to the thatch. Initially, you might think it is dog damage, dog urine damage. However, when the webworm causes this kind of damage, it's not unlike urine damage from dogs. It's not going to have a green outer circle from the added nitrogen from the urine from the dog. So that's another thing that you want to be looking for if you're diagnosing sod webworms. If there's a real severe situation with sod webworms, these spots, these basketball-sized dead patches, will coalesce if there's will coalesce into larger areas, so you're not going to see distinct round spots caused by sod webworm damage. Real quickly, to get to the slide that talks about what we do with some of these surface insects. The approach to surface insects is going to be different in regards to having to get the control product to where the insects are causing damage. We've already talked about chinch bugs and bill bugs, as well as being sod webworms, as being surface feeding insects. It is true that all three cause the damage on the surface. However, the chinch bugs and the bill bugs remain on the surface 24/7. So we can use a product such as Tall Star or Benfin in order to control chinch bugs and bill bugs. If we are attempting to control sod webworm, okay, you remember that we talked about the sod webworm burrows down into the thatch and lives below the thatch throughout the day and only comes out and feeds at night. So in order to control sod webworm, we need to use Dilox. This is the Dilox that is the same product that we would use for active grubs in a lawn. The difference between a Tall Star and a Dilox is that Tall Star will not move vertically. And if we attempt to use Tall Star on sod webworms, the Tall Star will not reach the sod webworms below the thatch. So sod webworms need Dilox. Dilox is applied, and watering instructions need to go to the homeowner in order to water the Dilox in, because the Dilox is going to need the added water in order to move it down to where the sod webworm is living throughout the day. So that's pretty much it. That's a short summary of surface feeding insects. And next up, we're going to be talking about some other summer problems, including summer annual weeds and nutsedge.